I'm gonna experiment with this for a second and then we'll see what we get. All right, finally, how to play what you hear in your head. This concept I'm about to teach you applies to whether you're writing something or improvising. There's not one idea or one approach when it comes to playing what you hear in your head and translating that onto the fretboard. But today I'm going to teach you what I consider to be the easiest and best sounding approach to actually playing what you hear in your head on the guitar. But first, before I teach you that, you have to ask yourself a question. When you hear something inspiring, when you see a guitar player playing what they hear in their head on the guitar, and it's really moving, what are they actually playing? They're not just playing a boring scale I mean, maybe a little bit of that, but they're not just playing the scales they learned or the modes they learned. That's not necessarily the secret to playing what you hear in your head. The secret is this. You build a repertoire of licks and phrases and ideas and actively apply that to your own playing, whether that's to your writing or your improvisation. And any guitar player who really excels will say the exact same thing. They get their ideas from other people and they actively use it in their own playing.
You know, I think it's a combination of the people that you learn from. And some people, they'll say like, oh, you have this original style. And I go, well, it's only original because it's the people I took from, you know.
So, I mean, I copied everybody and still do. So I think that's where it ends up coming from. It's just, and in a way, my style is probably perpetually confused because I love Burt Bacharach just as much as I love Yngwie. Can I fit those two things together? I don't know.
If you look at Picasso and all the awesome, if slightly weird things that he did, like, he didn't start out drawing stuff like that. He started out trying to copy other stuff. I think it's fine for musicians to do that. I could spend the next 3 decades of my life just trying to sound like B.B. King, and I would still not sound like B.B. King. But I would have learned stuff about vibrato and phrasing, which might help me to be a more musical player.
So you can learn all your scales and all your notes on the fretboard and all that. That's all really important, don't get me wrong. But the fastest way to play what you hear in your head is to simply build a repertoire. Learn a ton of stuff from guitarists that really inspire you and start using that in your writing and your improvisation. I'll give you a real life example of how I did this with a solo that I wrote. So this solo is just a collection of ideas that I got from other guitar players over the years that I intentionally used in my own playing. So this first lick, that's an idea from John Petrucci that I got from Glasgow Kiss. And this little articulation right here, I don't remember exactly where I got that from, but that's like a neo-soul little articulation. Then this section right here, that first little bend entrance into the legato, I got that from Mateus Azzato, which is basically a thing he does all the time where he hits a note and then slides into the bend. And then this legato piece itself, that little legato piece is actually a phrasing idea that I got from Eric Johnson that he uses all the time. Then this next bending section, I got this from John Petrucci again. And those are just double stop bends. This next section, I can't really pinpoint exactly where I got it, to be honest. It was just a bunch of experimenting with sounds that came out as I was writing. This next section is really just a Paul Gilbert sequence that he uses all the time that I started implementing into my playing a long time ago, which is essentially like a 6-note per string sequence. And what I'm doing here is I'm actually just taking, this is something that I got from John Petrucci actually also, is in the solo As I Am. He does this thing where he outlines the blues scale, but he adds in a chromatic note on every single string of the blues scale. So instead of this, pentatonic scale, sorry, not blues scale, he just takes this pentatonic scale and adds a chromatic note in between like this. So instead of, he goes, and it has this really cool bluesy chromatic pentatonic feel. And what I did is I took that idea, and what I did is I took this Paul Gilbert 6-note per string sequence that's really common for him, and I used it. And there's this next section. And I actually got this section from Neil Sean, the guitar player from Journey. It's just the first time I learned this sort of pentatonic sequence was from him from a solo called Lights. And so the sequence is this. Right? It's just like descending in fourths. So I took this idea, I just changed it a little bit. I applied it to the key that I was in. Those little slide articulations too is just stuff I picked over time that I actively have worked on to implement into my playing. And then the last little section, this I got also from Eric Johnson. As you can tell, John Petrucci and Eric Johnson are some of my favorite guitar players, so I take a lot from them. And this is essentially just a pentatonic shape using some economy picking that Eric Johnson does all the time. I got this specific lick from the Cliffs of Dover song. And then lastly, we have this section. I don't really know exactly where I got that. I can place almost everything, but not everything. That was just kind of experimental, and it came out. And then the very last lick, this is a sort of Stevie Ray Vaughan lick where he's in a normal pentatonic box that everyone knows, this one. He does this thing a lot where he does a phrase and he goes back to the minor seventh. He like hits on it twice to emphasize the minor seventh in the scale. So like, that note. And so I really love that sound. So I took a phrasing idea from Stevie Ray Vaughan and added that into here. So as you can see, basically everything from the solo I could trace back to ideas I got from other people. And when I'm improvising or writing, I use this idea. The question is how do I take other people's ideas, make them my own, and put them into whatever key I want? To understand how to take licks and transpose them into any key and use them in your own playing, I'm gonna take two well-known licks. The first one is the intro lick to the solo from Stairway to Heaven. And the next one is from the solo Back in Black by AC/DC. The first step is to learn the lick, obviously. So hopefully you already have step one done. You already have some licks that you've memorized over the years. So that's the famous lick that you've all heard a million times. So the next step is to identify the root notes of that lick. You can use your ear to do this by just asking yourself what sounds like home bass, what sounds like you could end the song and if it lands on that note, it would sound good. And it's that A note for me. But if you don't have a developed ear yet, there's a really simple way to figure out what the root notes in this specific lick are, in any lick. All you have to do is Google the song and the key of the song, Stairway to Heaven key, and it will tell you that it's an A minor. So the next step is to figure out where the A notes, since we're in A minor, where are the A notes in that lick? That's it. Right there. Right there. The reason why this is important is because if we want to transpose this lick, we need to know what the root notes of the lick are, so then we can place it into the next key, which is step number 3. So we're going to take this lick and we're going to transpose it into a new key of this backing track. We're going to take this lick and we're going to actually transpose it to the key of C sharp minor, which fits the new backing track that we're going to use. This backing track is by Tremaine. He's a really good guitar player and it's a cool backing track. So we know that there was a note here in the lick and right there as well. So we need to take one of these A notes, move it up to C sharp, and then play the same lick in relation to where this note is. Now we're playing the same exact Stairway to Heaven lick, but in C sharp minor. So all we did was take the root notes and shift them to a new root note of the new key that we're going to be in. Now from here, we don't want to totally rip off the lick, but we want to make it our own and tweak it a little bit. And to be honest, a lot of times the backing track, the difference in rhythm and chord progression will take care of a lot of that. Your natural ability to just tweak the rhythm and note choice will just come out naturally. But it's good to follow principles. And what I mean by that is there's a principle or an idea that's going on here with this lick, which is sort of this idea of going through the pentatonic scale and then backtracking to notes. And string skipping. The first 2 notes are a string skip. String skip, backtrack. And what we're gonna do is we're gonna take this idea of string skipping and backtracking to a previous note of the scale, and we're gonna run with it. And we're gonna sort of develop this sequence that's like, and then we're gonna string skip. Instead of backtracking with a finger roll like the original lick, we're gonna string skip like this. And then keep going down the scale. And then string skip again. So it looks like this. And we're gonna change the rhythm a little bit to triplets. And that'd be cool to do some like little thingamabobber there at the end. So we're gonna throw on the backing track. I'm gonna experiment with this for a second and then we'll see what we get. So as you can tell there, I used some double stop bends at the beginning because I thought it would just sound super rock, like in your face right at the beginning. Those other licks that I just played after the initial Stairway to Heaven type lick, that's a different story. We'll go over that sort of thing a different time. But you can clearly see that that 4th step was tweaking it and making it my own. And what we got was something pretty badass actually. So again, the 4 steps were to learn the lick, and then number 2 was to identify the root notes of the lick. Number 3 was to switch it to a new key by placing those root notes on new root notes. And then the 4th step was to tweak it, use this general idea of what's going on in the lick and tweak it to make it your own. Now, a bonus piece of knowledge, which would be step number 5, would be to know what shape that you're in with this scale. So we're doing this. And it's really helpful to know what shape we're in because then we could have more note choices. So we're in the just standard, everyone knows pentatonic box. Right? And that's helpful because then I have more note choices to work with within this box. And then I also have a reference of like, okay, where am I at in the key? And it gives you a place to like go off of. It gives you like a landmark essentially. So anytime you learn a new lick, it's helpful to correlate that with a shape that you know, a scale shape that you know. And if you don't know scale shapes and how to play them across the fretboard, click the link in my bio and you can get the free course on that. The next lick we're going to demonstrate is the Back in Black solo, just the beginning where he goes. Again, the first thing that I go to actually is the bonus thing that I just showed you, which is like, what shape are we in? And we're in this shape right here. Right, and that's helpful to know because it gives me a reference point, like where am I at, what am I playing, what does the shape look like, what note choices do I have? But if we follow that 4-step system, number 1 is learn the lick, we've done that, cool. Number 2 is to identify the root notes. Knowing the shape helps me identify the root notes because I know where the root notes are in all the shapes. And that's step 2. Step 3 is to put it to the new key. So we're going to take it to this backing track, which is an A minor. And now step number 4 is we tweak it. So instead of just copying the lick, again, I like to take the idea of what's going on. And there's this initial like back and forth between strings. So instead of just going straight up and down the scale like this, you know, we've got this sort of slide, and then these backtracking things. Right, so it would be fun to take that sort of idea of going back and forth in between strings in that pentatonic scale. Also using this sort of like, we could just straight up rip that off, honestly, that sort of phrasing idea. And then this double stop idea, which is literally no one's idea because everyone uses it. And we can take that and let's see what we come up with. And that's what we get. So we've completed all 4 steps, and now we can start using these phrasing ideas in our playing too. I can implement this into my improvisation. I can implement it into my writing. So anytime you learn new solos and new licks and things like that, you want to consistently be doing these 4 steps and putting it into different keys, putting it into different contexts, putting it into your writing, putting it into your improvisation. That's when you're truly growing as a guitar player. And like I said, if you don't know how to play the scales, if you don't know how to correlate licks to shapes and play scales all across the fretboard in any key, then click the link in the bio down, or not in the bio, in the description, and you can get my free course, Melodic Freedom. Hopefully this helps. If it did, subscribe, and we'll see you in the next video.